Greetings, this is Peter Williams, and for the subject this week of Native Americans, the book that I chose is The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. The illustrator is Ellen Forney, and the cover art is by Kirk Benchoff. And I chose this book because it touches on what it's like to live on the Spokane Indian Reservation as a Native American, and it also touches on what a Native American can encounter when going to a predominantly white school. And as far as the story itself, it focuses on a 14-year-old Native American boy named Junior, also known as Arnold, and he does have disabilities, and his family is poor. And due to the fact that he does have disabilities, he is targeted a lot by the community. As far as where he lives in Welpinit on the reservation, he is targeted by a lot of people in town. His best friend Rowdy, who has a lot of behavioral issues because he is abused by his father. They're best friends. And eventually they do go to a powwow together where they do end up getting separated, and Junior ends up getting beaten up by a group of brothers known as the Andrus brothers. And later on, Junior and Rowdy, they start high school at the Welpinit High School, and they have a teacher, Mr. P. And Junior ends up discovering that the books that they're reading, they're over 30 years old because it has his mother's name in it. And he gets upset and he throws the book, and he ends up hitting Mr. P in the face. And he's not trying to hit Mr. P in the face, but that's what happens. After he gets suspended, Mr. P sees him sitting outside, and he actually apologizes to Junior because he discusses his part in as far as how he's affected the reservation, and basically how like the white community that has that presence there has basically set them up to fail. And he basically tells him, you need to get out of here, because if you don't get out of here, you'll be trapped forever. And he also talks about how the same thing basically happened to his sister, because she wanted to be a writer, she wanted to write romance novels, and now she basically just lives in their basement and does nothing. So this leads Junior to tell his parents that he wants to go to Reardon, and so they do let him go. For the first day, his father drives him, and Junior notices right off the bat that basically everybody's white. And so he goes to his homeroom, and everybody gives him a stare, because it's like, their reaction is, who is this person? And when they call on his name Arnold, the fact that he calls himself Junior is not a very common thing, so people are laughing. And this is also where he meets Penelope, and we'll talk about her more in a bit. He then also addresses how he ends up getting targeted by a lot of the jocks, especially one in particular named Roger, who's this really big kid. And eventually Roger ends up confronting him, and he says something extremely racist to Junior, and Junior just clocks him right in the face. And Junior's surprised by Roger's reaction, because they get up and they walk away, and they're just kind of scared of him. And on the reservation, fights happen all the time, so he was expecting that he was going to get up and fight back, and then they'd be targeting him basically for the rest of the school year and just fights nonstop. But of course he learns, like, okay, things aren't like that in Reardon. So on another trip to school, as far as his dad's not able to drive him because he doesn't have enough money for gas, but he ends up getting a ride from another character named Eugene on his motorcycle. And the next time he sees Roger is in fact nice to him, and so is the rest of the group. And then he realizes, okay, since I fought back, now I have respect. And when the story gets to Halloween, Junior decides to dress up as a homeless person, and he jokes saying that for him it's pretty easy. But he also notices that Penelope is doing the same thing, and she's doing it to raise money. Instead of getting treats for trick-or-treating, she's actually going to be asking for change, and she's going to be donating it to the homeless. And so Junior says, well, that's what I'm going to do too. I'll do that in Welpinit. And then when he does that, he collects the money, but then he ends up getting attacked by a group of people wearing Frankenstein masks, and they take his money, and he basically sees that as a message saying that you're an outsider now. You're going to Reardon now, so now you're a traitor, and you're not one of us anymore. And that's how he took that. And of course, he tells Penelope what happens, and she feels bad for him. But then after that, things kind of seem like they kind of go back to normal with them. Like she's not really his friend yet. And then when Thanksgiving comes, and the story addresses that they have a typical Thanksgiving dinner, which I found was interesting, and so does Junior. But the family ends up finding out after Thanksgiving that his sister is going to be getting married to a Flathead Indian in Montana, and Junior sees that as a sign that, hey, my sister is making changes, so can I. I can do that too. And he gets inspired, and he ends up reaching out to a student named Gordy, who, he describes him as the strongest geek in the world. So he's very smart, he's very intelligent, but he's also, larger. But yes, he's a very, very smart kid. And later, there's a time Junior's going to the bathroom, and he ends up hearing Penelope vomiting in the girls' room, and that's when he confronts her as far as her being bulimic, and she ends up confessing to him like how she feels as far as that she's scared all the time, and it kind of shows that, children that age, regardless of their background, everybody has problems. Obviously, some have worse problems than others, but nobody is immune to problems. Nobody's perfect. But after that, they become friends, and he describes it as sort of dating. So like they've held hands a few times, they've kissed, and everybody's seeing them together. It's kind of made them the hot couple, and now he's popular. And he kind of gets the feeling that she's dating him because her father is racist, and he's made racist comments to him. So he kind of is making a guess that, all right, she's dating me just to get back at her dad. But as they are together, she eventually confesses to him that, when she gets older, she does want to travel and become an architect. And Junior identifies with that because he's interested in becoming an architect too. Because I didn't mention this earlier, but Junior also, he loves to draw. Like, he loves to draw pictures, and that's his way of, like, how he says as far as, like, interpreting and communicating with the world. So as far as her saying that she wants to be an architect, he really connects with that. Eventually, he and Penelope go to the big dance at the school, and this is basically his moment where he's like, okay, nobody knows yet that I'm poor, and this is when it's all going to come out. There's no way around it now, because his dad gives him his old suit from the 70s, but he wears it to the dance, and everybody, like, absolutely loves it. It's like everybody thinks it's the coolest thing in the world, and I thought that was great. I like that. And then eventually, after the dance is all done, Roger invites Penelope and Junior to go and get pancakes, and then he realizes, okay, I'm finished, I'm done, because there's no way I'm going to be able to pay for pancakes. And then once they're there, he's in the bathroom, and Roger confronts him on it, and Junior says that, listen, I lost my wallet, I'm really nervous because I can't afford for tonight. And he says, oh, no, that's fine, no problem. But then after that, Penelope confronts Junior and basically asks him, are you poor? And of course, then it's out in the open. But he doesn't get Junior doesn't get the reaction that he thinks he's going to get, because Penelope actually kisses him on the cheek and demands that Roger drive him home. And Junior kind of realizes that, okay, it's out in the open now, but it's okay. He does get messages from his sister. He does get a letter where she tells him that she is writing her life story, and she's having trouble finding work. And she also touches on her new life with her husband. And then after that, the Reardon basketball team has their first match against Welpinit. And so Junior is now a part of the team, and they go up against Welpinit, and they actually go to the reservation. And once they go in, people are chanting, Arnold sucks. When the team actually comes out there, everybody turns their back. And while Junior is playing, somebody throws a coin at his head and actually causes him to bleed, cuts his head open. And because of that, he ends up getting pulled out. And Eugene is cleaning him up in the locker room. And I actually really admired this about Junior. He says, I want to keep going. Don't send me home. Stitch me up. And Eugene stitches him up. And then when he's out there, Rowdy, who's on the other team, and I didn't mention this earlier, but the fact that uh, Junior is now going to Reardon, Rowdy totally resents him now. Doesn't want anything to do with him. Basically, absolutely hates him now. And so when Junior's back out and ready to play, Rowdy elbows him, completely knocks him out unconscious, and causes push fights with the other teammates. Parents want to come onto the court, and so, and of course Junior says in the story, all this is secondhand information because I was knocked out at the time. But once he finally gets to the hospital and he's awake, his coach is there, and he tells him that he's proud of him as far as how hard he's been working. And unfortunately, Will Pennant did end up winning, but the coach still said that he was proud of him, and he ends up spending the entire night with him. After Christmas, Junior's grandmother ends up getting hit by a drunk driver on her way home from a powwow, and she doesn't die right away, but she dies hours later. At her wake, there are 2,000 Indians that show up. And after Valentine's Day, Eugene dies. And basically what happened between them, he was drinking with a friend, some sort of altercation happened, and his friend ended up shooting him in the face. And so after that, obviously, and it's understandable, Junior is very depressed and he's sad. He misses days of school. When he comes back and he comes into Miss Jeremy's room, she gives him a hard time, but all the students in the room, they stand up for him, and they basically march on out of the room and protest how she treated him. So it definitely goes to show you, how, people view Arnold now, and how just, how much he's really been accepted by all the other students in the school. Eventually, Reardon has its rematch with Will Pennant. And the coach assigns Junior to guard Rowdy. And basically, they stand up between each other, and Rowdy tries to go for a slam dunk. Junior gets it, and he's able to get a 3-point shot, and that basically completely, sets the tone of the game for the rest of the game. And Reardon ends up winning this time. And as he's winning, or as they won, Junior feels really happy, but then he realizes, in a sort of David and Goliath context, Reardon is actually Goliath, and he realizes that, okay, all these, my team, everybody on my team, they have good home lives, they're well taken care of, they've been fed, good night's sleep, and all that. And it's okay, we just beat a bunch of kids that basically, I don't even know when the last time they ate, that their parents could be, abusive or alcoholics. So he really saw that he felt really rotten after that, as far as that happened. Then after that, the school counselor pulls Junior's side. That this is later on in the story, that his sister had died. And when his dad picks him up, his dad tells him that she and her husband, they had a party in their trailer. They left the stove on while they were drunk and passed out, and the whole trailer basically burned, and they burned to death. They were drunk, passed out, so they didn't even feel it, but it's, obviously it's pretty awful that happened. When he gets home, his mother is grief-stricken, and she's there with 30 of their cousins. And after the funeral, Junior runs into Rowdy. As he ran away, they run into each other. Rowdy is crying, and he basically says, her dying, it's your fault, basically. He blames him for that. After the school year is over, Junior basically stays home and reads comic books. But Rowdy eventually ends up coming to visit him and saying that he, hey, I'm bored, let's play some basketball, and they play basketball together. And that basically kind of, it gives you the sign that Rowdy, he obviously is, I don't think his character would ever admit it, but basically they've reconnected and they've started their friendship again. Now, as far as how the book offers usefulness in understanding the culture. Throughout the story, dealing with the reservation, it definitely addresses that the reservation has a problem with alcohol. It has a problem with fighting, and it also has a problem with a high death rate. Like Junior addresses that I'm only 14 years old. He says that I'm only 14 years old and I've been to 40 funerals. So, that's a lot of people to have had to say goodbye to at such an early age. And as far as alcoholism, his father drinks. Yeah, he's a musician, but he drinks. Rowdy's father drinks. His mother does drink as well, too. And of course, his grandmother was killed by a drunk driver. It does give you information on the Spokane Reservation itself, such as when it was founded. It does make reference to the casino in the area as a possible means of employment. When Junior and Rowdy go to the powwow, it does go into depth as far as some of the things that you'll see at the powwow, such as singing, war dancing, gambling, storytelling, laughter, hamburgers and hot dogs. And as he also says, plenty of alcoholic brawling, which you could argue is what happened to him when he ended up getting beaten by those brothers. And also he says, did I mention that these brothers that he gets beaten up by, they're in their 30s. So if you can imagine 30-year-old men kneeing a 14-year-old boy in the testicles, I mean, that's, for me, that's unheard of. It's like, why would you do that? It does give you a sense of the landscape too, as far as like geographical features such as the lake, the pine trees, and before he plays basketball with Rowdy, he does talk about an old story about how the lake, there's, it's part of a volcano, and how this horse had died, and then the lake catches fire. The story through Mr. P, and obviously through other stuff as well, the story also gives you an impression on, for lack of a better term, the white influence that's happened to the reservation. So basically you get a sense of the problem with alcoholism, the poverty, the violence, and also like how they react to Junior going to school, the intolerance and the lack of acceptance for anybody that's different. But the book kind of shows you that, all right, this didn't happen on its own. This is apart from white teachers coming in and basically as Mr. P says it, to beat the Indian out of them. It also touches on the dynamics of how that reservation is. Like to focus on Mr. P, it talks about how teachers on the reservation, they have to live in a compound that's right next to the high school. It also touches on Indian health services, obviously because of Junior's disabilities. So as far as like, they gave him half the Novocaine because the doctor thought that Indians had like twice the amount of resistance to pain. It also touches a little bit about the Reardon's misconceptions of Indians, because Junior addresses that everybody thinks that Indians are better off because of the casino and thinking that they get help from the government, but Junior addresses obviously that that's not the case. The casino doesn't bring in as much money for the reservation as everybody thinks. And obviously they're not getting as much help from the government, because Junior even addresses there have been times when he's gone without eating for 14 hours. The book also, through his sister and her letters, it also touches on that not every reservation is exactly the same. I mean, obviously they have their own dynamics, such as his sister's husband. She's a Flathead Indian in Montana, and as far as their different dynamics, they're still riding horses. There's about 20 restaurants on the reservation, and whites and Indians actually live together on the reservation. In fact, there's a town on the reservation that's basically all white, and they want to secede from the reservation. But if that actually happened, that town would be completely surrounded by Indian reservation, which is interesting. And also, coming back to his grandmother's funeral, it it kind of gives you an impression of how a Native American can feel about celebrity culture's approach to Native Americans. Because at the wake, this billionaire comes and makes a speech, and as you're reading the story, you can feel the eyes rolling it in the back of everybody's heads, like, oh God, here's this guy making the speech, and he's talking about how he loves the Native American people and he's a collector of their stuff, and he comes back and he's like, I had this powwow dress that belonged to your mother. Somebody who had stolen it had sold it to me, and after all this time, I'm finally giving it back to you. And then Junior's mother's basically, she says, that's not hers. That belongs to somebody else. You're wrong. And he basically leaves, and it's completely awkward for him, and everybody on the reservation is laughing. And it kind of gives you an interpretation of, like, people that are just so, like, well off and so out of touch that they kind of jump in and they say, well, here's my thoughts and I have this, and it's like basically showing that they're so out of touch that they really don't know what they're talking about. And I kind of found that interesting. And that was actually one of my personal favorite moments in the book. Okay, as far as how it could be incorporated into library programming, first I want to say right off the bat, I almost feel that this book is more important for young people in general, regardless of their background, as far as race or anything like that. I think this is a really important book for all young people to read. Now, the problem with that is obviously there's a lot of content in the book that can make it a risk of being challenged, such as the language, the racist comments, especially those made by excuse me, by one of his friends. It also he discusses on how he likes to masturbate too, and obviously parents may not appreciate that as well too. If it's possible, I do think that it would be great for book discussions for young adult readers, because I think it's a good way to show that it doesn't matter where you come from. Everybody at that age, they have problems, and it's really good for people that might feel like they're cut off from the people around them, like they feel like they're alone, they're isolated, and they don't have anybody, or they don't have a lot of friends. I think it is a really great book for that, and it's really good to show that a person with so many obstacles, so many things that can hold them back, how if you really try, you can really rise above that, and you can succeed. Obviously, it's going to be a lot harder, but if you have that will and you keep trying, it's possible. And I think that is a message that all young adults, all children really need to have. Absolutely. But as far as the risk of it being challenged, I think that a library could possibly go around that by an e-newsletter or emails to parents, or posts such as that, basically letting them know that this book is going to be a part of the book club, and if you feel that is not an appropriate book for your child, we're just giving you this warning. Here are the contents, and if you do not want them to participate, then we can respect that. But having said that, in my opinion, I think that the message far outweighs the content. And so obviously you have to weigh, like, okay, what's more important? Exposing children to inappropriate language and questionable content, or giving them a message that really, like, can show them, like, you really can achieve your dreams if you like are willing. In more of a Native American context, as far as diversity, any library that is trying to do outreach to a Native American demographic in his town. I definitely think in that same context, like if they had a book club that was specifically for Native American readers, that I think that would be really good for them too, because it's showing that, you know, depending on what their situation might be, like depending at like if the library service is a reservation, it shows them that, you know, it gives them a character to connect with, but it can also show them that their life doesn't have to be that way if that is in fact how the dynamic of the reservation is. So it can definitely be used for that. And again, I thought this was a fantastic book. I'm very glad that I had the opportunity to read it. And again, I think it has a place in any library, regardless of the racial demographics, anything like that. Because I think it's a very important book for young people to read. And for a library that is trying to pursue services for Native Americans, this book would really be great for a book club that is trying to promote Native American services and provide them books. All right. Well, thank you very much, and take care.